how this topic would be accepted, whether people were interested in Greenway photography. But I think we have some photographers here. We have at least one naturalist. So if I say anything that is obviously wrong, let me know. Because I am not a professional photographer. I'm not a naturalist. I'm a retired OBGYN military physician. If anyone does go into labor, photography is really growing in popularity on the island. You see cameras everywhere. And where you don't see cameras, you see phones. So everybody's a photographer now. And I think that's really good. There's a photography club at the Island Art Association. Has anyone been to that? Bill McKenna's president. They meet every month. You might look into that. Most of the galleries here have photographs. So it's a popular form of art. Logan Pearson has a gallery at the Blue Door on Center Street next to Coffee Shop. It focuses just on photography. Does anyone know Logan? He is a wild and crazy digital art photographer. If you see this stuff, you've probably seen it in advertisements and all. And Jensen Bell is a wonderful wildlife photographer. And he has two other artists that do jewelry and sculpture. Well worth the trip down. Okay, the Greenway. I bet have most people been on the Greenway?
Yes.
Some people are afraid to go on it, so I'm going to talk about what it is and what some of the risks are. Why do we take photographs? John Jakarski, curator of photography for the Museum of Modern Art in New York, he did an exhibit in 1960 called Windows and Mirrors. Anybody heard of that? The idea of a window is the photographer is doing a documentary picture of what something looks like. That's the only goal. So you see this in scientific publications, cover of seed catalogs. All you're trying to show is the object. Mirrors are different. It's how the photographer responds to the object. It reflects back on him. So it's a personal view, an emotional view. So the idea is to transmit that to the viewer or their own personal, but it's different from just documentary photography. Anthropomorphism, that's when we take human characteristics, thoughts, desires, feelings, and project it onto a non-human. If you look at my Facebook page, I do it all the time. I know myself. And I think some of them are funny and some people don't, but you'll see some of that in this, I'm afraid. As for gear, I am a minimalist. This is a Canon T7i. It's an introductory camera in the Rebel series. Very inexpensive. This is a kit lens, 55 to 250 millimeters. And you say, but a wildlife photographer should have at least 600. That's true. If you're going to Africa or where the subject is far away. On our Greenway, they're very, very close. Sometimes you think they're too close. But this is really all you need. Anybody ever heard the term forest bathing? It's a Japanese concept. I can't remember it in Japanese. But the idea, if you go into a forest, often your blood pressure goes down, your heart rate goes down, you have less depression. They measured this. This is a physiological effect. Well, I think the Greenway works the same way for many of us that live here. I feel different once I get to that entrance and start my bike ride or hike. We could use the term Greenway bathing, but there are those alligators. I don't think it will catch on. I would like to cite two deceased friends who have been mentors and inspirations to all of us, Richard Olderman and Steve Leinberg. Okay, let's start with it. That's the primal fear. Primal fears are real. They're in our DNA. They look at baby chimpanzees and monkeys. They are immediately afraid of anything that looks like a snake. They don't have to be taught that. So that's our primal fear. I'm asked, are there gators out there? Yes, there are. I ride the Greenway 4 to 5 times a week for exercise. always with a camera, and I always see at least one or up to 4 alligators. As far as I know, no one's ever been hurt out there. You're seeing a lot of media now about alligator attacks. I don't think they've ever occurred on our Greenway. The iconic alligator is Mama Gator. Has anybody seen Mama? She's on the South Greenway, and they built a little fence so she won't come up on the pedestrian side anymore like she used to. She's famous for having babies. And they ride her back, they ride her tail, they ride her head. She's very, very photogenic. Susie and I have counted as many as 22 babies at one time. But for the last 2 years, I haven't seen any babies. As a gynecologist, I have to think, Mama, maybe you got a problem. There's a way to tell. If one of y'all will draw blood from Mama, I'll have FSH-LH run on her. I'll see if she needs any hormones. Just let me know. Are there snakes out there? Yes, there are. This is a banded water snake, harmless. I generally see 1 or 2 snakes per month. Again, no one that I know of has ever been hurt by one. I've seen 1 water moccasin since the Greenway opened in 2000. That's the big risk. And on the back of my bike, I always have spray. But we have a very good mosquito control unit here, and it's not a real problem. At the entrance and exit to the Greenways is this brochure put out by the city. Kathy Russell is the Greenway manager and does a real good job. And in that, there's a nice map. And on the right is the North Greenway running from Jasmine to Atlantic behind the rec center. It's 1.1 mile, and it's along the marsh, so it's brackish water, and that changes what you're going to see. On the left is the South Greenway, running from the Residence Inn on Sadler to Jasmine, but it's fresh water. It's 1.3 miles. So if you go through the rec center and go on the path is packed earth or grass, you go along the marsh, and then you'll see a lot of wading birds and brackish water type ecology. If you go behind the Residence Inn, or at the entrance from Jasmine, and go along the South Greenway, it looks like the real Florida. This is fresh water, the big oak trees, a lot of little songbirds. It's a different ecology. I have never been anywhere that within 3 miles you have such variety of ecological niches. It's tidal, it can be high tide, and you can see the alligators up to the bank almost, but I've never seen on the North Greenway them on the bank. And it can be low. This is not an unusual low tide. It gets so low, there'll just be a trickle of water. So this is the best time to see birds. The wading birds can wade in the mud, and the low water concentrates the fish. So it's a very good time for them to fish. Now, if you happen to be a turtle on the left side of the bank, and you want to go to the right side of the bank, pick your time. I think he's going to have to wait to high tide to complete that journey. Feathers, unique to birds. This is a feather. This is a takeoff from that old joke where Coach Lombardi, where they lost a lot, said, let's get back to basics. This is a football. And at that time it said, Coach, did you go over that again? But this is a feather. I think it's called an ibis, but I'm not sure. This part down here is called the calamus. And this part going up through the center is the rachis. And it's keratin, it's a hollow tooth. Then off the rachis are barbs. And off the barbs are barbules. They're little hooks. It's just like Velcro. So if the feather gets settled somehow, just run your hand like that, you rehook it. That's what birds do when they run their bill down the feather like that. The egret is rehooking up his flight feathers. That's preening. It's the second most common activity of birds other than feeding. You see them do this all the time. Some birds have 25,000 feathers, so it's a full-time job. The anhinga, this would be a window picture. You're just supposed to say that's an anhinga. That's in flight. We'll do a mirror picture later on. They're also called the snake bird. And you can see why. It looks like a snake when it comes up and swims on the surface of the water. This is where you see them drying his feathers. They lack in oil, so underwater where they fish, they get waterlogged and heavy. So they'll come up periodically, shake the water off, and then let the sun dry their wings, then go back to fishing. They fish in a very unusual way. They fish underwater, they have a sleek body, webbed feet, and can move very, very fast underwater. They spear the fish, but how are you going to eat the fish if you got your beak stuck through it? They do the fish toss. They actually toss the fish up in the air, trying to get the head to come down first, because it's the heaviest, so they can swallow it. That also puts the fins back, making it more easily swallowed. Now this is a small fish. They can do that with a big fish. Look at that. He probably weighs half of what the anhinga weighs. I don't think they can disarticulate their beaks, but they may be able to like a snake, but somehow they can get these large fish down. I watched him swallow this. He was able to swallow it. But I've seen images of anhingas and this type of fishing technique where he couldn't swallow it and the fish gets stuck and the bird doesn't do very well. So he was kind of taking a chance on this. This is one of my mirror pictures. I have a emotional impact by looking at this. The anhinga's always moving his head preening. And with that, you get a lot of very interesting photographs. Look at that neck. It goes down, then up, then back. His head's facing backwards. He's preening the back of his neck where it joins his body. And then the lighting on the feathers, I think, is nice. Similar picture, but a better view of his feathers. The shape of the feathers, the different colors. On the left-hand side, they're little dots. If you know anhingas, you'll recognize immediately this is the rear end of an anhinga. You can tell it's that because of the brown on the tail feathers right at the tips. But look at the design below that. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 different patterns of white on that black background. So to me, it makes an abstract. This is where the anthropomorphism comes in. I just cannot help myself. When I looked at this, I said, that looks like a 1920 or 1930 movie star looking over a fan. It's got that come hither look. And you got to notice that bright ruby eye that the sun goes through it. This one I identify with. To me, he looks like an elderly man with gray hair, thinking about the past, wondering about the future. Actually, he was just called a fish. Blue heron's a much bigger bird. The body's about 8 pounds. The wings are 6 to 7 feet. It's a huge bird. A solitary feeder. He goes in the water, stands there waiting for the fish to come to him. I've stood there as many as 30 minutes with him just standing there without moving a muscle. And in my mind, I'm saying, do something. Do anything. Fish, green, lay an egg, do something. And he did not, and I got back on the bike and left. He can grab fish with his beak, but he doesn't toss them. He can spear fish, but again, he doesn't toss them. He puts them on the ground and goes to the head and is able to swallow them. Sometimes in that shallow water, schools of small fish will come by while he's just standing there. He'll plunge into the middle of it and sometimes gets multiple fish with one strike. Here there are 2 fish. And this is kind of an arty picture in the sense of the lighting of the head and the reflections in the back. So it's kind of a mirror and a window at the same time. I like the 1930s, 40s noir movies. Philip Marlowe detective, everything's in shadow. When I was young, it drove me crazy. But now that I'm older, I appreciate what they're trying to do. So I think the blue heron is a pretty good model for that type of lighting. In color, he's very different. Those feathers on top of his head come up when he's upset, angry, or he's scratching his head, which they do a lot. But notice how the white feathers under his beak turn to a russet color, and then to white long feathers on his neck. And that blue spot is characteristic of the blue herons. And notice a little bit of red underneath it. In the frontal views, you'll see that. But this one, it looks like an old master painting of a nobleman. Rather than a tartan or a cloak in front of him with his family history, he has his wing. Wide variety of feathers, shapes, patterns, and you can see the red there that outlines the blue spot. He has kind of a funny look on his face also that looks like a nobleman. This is one of my favorite paintings. This is Sir Edward Landseer's Monarch of the Glen. You've got the elk in sort of a three-quarter stance. His head is slightly raised. He looks arrogant. He looks haughty. Can we match that on the Greenway? The Monarch of the Greenway. Pay attention to his eye. They don't have eyebrows, but in certain situations, a top quarter of his eye is covered by feathers. He has a very stern look, very focused look, and I call it the look. You'll see that in a lot of his there you go. He's got the look, and he's a wild and crazy guy. For those of us that remember Steve Martin on Saturday Night Live. Strange tongue. I have no idea why it's shaped like that. It looks like there's a hook so something can't go out, but I'm not sure. There's a Japanese expression, an art form called kyuta, and of course in English it's cute. So to me, the heron seems to be saying, take a look, I'm cute. Got crossed legs, neck with kind of a subtle curve, head tilted, and that look on his face. So you get a lot of varieties of looks from these birds, depending on what you're going to project onto them. This is an abstract of the chest of a great blue heron. Look at the colors, the shapes, the different variety of feathers. That's his neck going off to the side with the long neck feathers coming into the center of the picture. Now when they fly, the one was flying toward me, they raise their wings up into a powerful swoop down. So I thought if I just isolate those wings and increase the colors, it will form an abstract of flight. At least that was my thought. So the colors have been enhanced. Now when they land, they fold those wings against their body. So I said, I'll do an abstract of landing. Eliminated the body and just did the wings. So to me, it forms an abstract of flight as well. And you can see the blue spot and then the red outlining it. It looks like a floating sculpture to me. Great blue versus the snake. I have several stories I'm going to illustrate with images. Susie and I were walking on the North Greenway, very low tide, and we saw this banded water snake. There's no water. He's really struggling in the mud. He's having trouble moving. About 30 yards away was a great blue heron fishing. I saw him raise his head up. I said, Susie, he's seen the snake. So he flies over and looks at the snake and thinks, is this edible? And he decides, indeed it is. So he grabs the snake. The snake, I think, in his heart of heart, knows what the outcome's going to be. But he's going to fight back. He bites the heron. Unfortunately for the snake, he bites the heron on his beak. He probably doesn't even feel it, but puts his head in a very precarious situation. And you can see the look on the great heron's face. And of course, he swallows the snake. And probably didn't have to eat the rest of the day. White egret's also a solitary feeder, much like the great blue heron. And this is a picture of him just waiting for the birds to come, the fish to come to him. And while he's waiting, he's preening. This is kind of an artsy picture due to the reflections and all of that. He can wade in mud and stay pristine white. I don't know how he does it. This was a strange situation. The egret was fishing where schools of fish were coming. I saw him catch 5 fish with no problem. He just done and get the fish, little small fish. And then he did this. He picked up a branch first and then the fish. And you can see he was very confused. He can bite down enough to hold the fish and the branch, but he can't swallow the fish. The branch is in the way. So he shook his head up and down. He moved around, put back into the water, and finally he said, "This isn't going to work." So he dropped both. The fish swam away, the branch floated away, and he just looked confused. I've never seen that before. Did better with the frog.
Oh my gosh.
It took a minute then to swallow the frog, but I want you to note this bump right here. We have 7 cervical vertebrae, 7 vertebrae in our neck, so we can turn our head a little bit, but we can't look backwards. Birds have 25 or more, so they can do all kinds of things with their neck. But you can see the way the head is contorted here because that modified vertebrae allows that, and that's important in flight of the heron. That's why they have that crook in their neck. They're able to do that. I probably can't pronounce this correctly, but it's chiaroscuro, I think. It's an Italian arts expression for the interplay of light and dark. And I found that very attractive. You can see the light on her right cheek. It's a shadow on her left that fades over, giving a roundedness of her cheek and a roundedness of her shoulder. The white egret is perfect for this. This is an egret during breeding season, so you've got a sort of a 3/4 view with the neck going across and the head looking at you, and the breeding feathers splayed out over the black. I try to get the eyes where you can see them. It makes a difference in how people respond to the photographs. Now, a similar view with a little bit more mystery, because you've got the head going away from you. You can't see it from where you're sitting, but if you were close, you can see a green patch at his eye. That's only in breeding season. So it adds a little splash of green to all that white. Now, the one that I prefer is this one, which is more mysterious. He's looking away from you. You can see his eye, though, so you can project your feelings onto the bird. On the left side, very bright light. Some of the feathers are even backlit, and then it slowly turns into black as you go over the curve of his back. I think it's the same as that Italian term. These birds can have violent conflict. This is the most violent conflict I've ever seen on the Greenway. The bird on the right, it was high tide, North Greenway, was floating in the water, but he was in someone else's fishing territory. I heard a loud squawk, and to my left, another white egret came barreling in, and like Dick Buckus, knocked him over. He jumped on his chest and with his talons grabbed his feathers. And you can see that the attacked bird is surprised. He stays on his back like that, and the other one trying to get away, and he thinks, you know, if I could grab that bird's neck, I can cut off his respiration, and he'll go away leaving me alone. What he didn't realize, by doing that, he brings his head up very close to the bird, and he grabs his head and pushes it underwater. Now, this is confusing to me. Did the bird know what he was doing? Did he have a concept that if I push his head underwater, he'll drown? Or was it just instinct? I highly recommend this book, The Bird Way, by Jennifer Ackerman. They're finding that birds have the same emotions, the ability to plan, to predict the future, to remember that we have. So I don't know. Maybe he really knew what he was doing. The underwater bird twists free and they fly away. But I think the underwater bird probably won't be coming back to that fishing area. Tricolored heron's a smaller bird, very pretty. They fish from a perch. He just looks at the water looking for fish. Must have fantastic eyesight. Now, from the photographer's perspective, this is really helpful. You can focus on the bird, get your shutter speed enough for flight, put Birdsong. My camera will take 6 pictures per second. Expensive cameras will take 14, like a movie almost. And right before he flies, he'll do a little bump. So you can start as soon as he does that, and then pan with him as he's flying. He'll fly over to where the fisher is, drag his feet into water to slow down, put his wings out as air brakes, and then he can go into the water to get the fish. This is kind of an artsy picture in the sense of the feet above the water in yellow and the diagonal of the wings. If the perches are apart with water with fish between them, he'll just fly back and forth. And they're very acclimated to photographers. He'll do that as long as you stand there, as long as there's fish. He does some solitary feeding. He will go where there's a big bird, like the egret, and there's a distance he can get to and be tolerated, and he knows what it is. So he waits for the egret to scare fish in his direction. And this is kind of artsy, and you got the curve of that and the curve of the backs and all of that. So I pay attention to that, but most of this is a hobby. Beautiful bird. Got bluish back of his wings, white on the underside. And this strange color, if any artist can tell me what this is, I don't know what that is. It's sort of a purplish, rosish, I'm not sure what you would call it, but it's a beautiful color. In breeding season, he develops more color, and this is him, of course, preening again. And here he's preening the back. These feathers are very small and delicate, unlike a lot of the other birds. And you can see the white stripe in his neck and the red that separates it. And then he has a pretty eye, too. In our house, we have a retention pond behind us, and an old tree fell into the water in a hurricane about 5 to 10 years ago. All kind of wildlife uses that as a waylay station to rest, to fish, to do whatever. And we've seen all kinds of birds. Susie was going by in the living room. We always look out. Is there anything out there? We do it instinctively now without even thinking about it. And she called me. She said, "There's a tricolor out here with one leg." I said, I doubt it. I suspect the bird's standing on one leg, and they'll bring that other leg all the way up to the talons or in the feathers. You can't see it. Many times I've been fooled thinking I have seen a one-legged bird, and then puts the other leg down before it flies. But this was a one-legged bird. You can see that half the leg is missing. So we watched him for about a half hour. He could fly to the tree and land with some difficulty and fish. Then he could fly to the land. Couldn't walk, he would hop. So we watched him for quite a while, then he disappeared, and I don't know what happened to him. I put it on Facebook, and there was thoughts that maybe an alligator ate him. Maybe, but the consensus seemed to be snapping turtle. They had very sharp jaws or whatever, and could have just gone right through that thin leg. Snowy egrets about the same size. They fish for perch also, and they're very famous for the yellow feet, the so-called golden slippers. Now this one, kind of artsy, because if you look at it, he looks very proud that he's caught that fish. Now he's a solitary feeder, kind of like the tricolor. If other bigger birds are stirring up the fish, you have 3 roseate spoonbills with that long beak going into the water, scaring all the fish. So he kind of stands at the outskirts of the circle, waiting for the fish to come to him. Now he had his fight feathers up though, on his head and on his back. He can't stand tricolors. The tricolor was doing the same thing, so he's chasing the tricolor away.
Oh,
He's a pretty bird when the white feathers are up. They're very photogenic. He uses these to bluff. He flew in, put up the flight way to scare this ibis. The ibis is quite a bit bigger than him and has a very long, sharp beak. So he seems to be saying, the ibis, bring it on. And the snowy put down the feathers, put down the wings, and left. He often will fight each other, and they'll swoop up each other with the talons out and beaks out. And I think these make nice pictures. I've seen things like this in Asian scrolls. It has sort of an Asian look to it. Susie said no, but I think it has a very Asian look. Now the one on the right, we watched this maybe 30 minutes. There were a whole bunch of snowies. Susie named him the meanie because it was one of them that was chasing everybody else away. Now the bird on the rock was peacefully, he's a pacifist, was fishing off the rock. The meanie flew in, put the feathers up, the other one left. No fight. And there are pretty birds. You've got the reflections here, and the rock is a foreground. So I enjoy photographing them. This is that tree that fell into the retention pond by our house. And when the sun comes over the house about 8 or 9 o'clock, it lights up an area like a spotlight. And the birds will go there. I think they can see the fish easier in the bright light. So you have the snowy arriving in the spotlight while tricolor just sits there and watches. Green heron, about the same size. Beautiful bird. I love this pattern on his wings. It looks like the Art Deco patterns that you see from the 20s and 30s. And then the red, very deep at his beak, and then goes down, fades to almost white as it goes down his chest. And he has a beautiful eye also. He fishes from a perch, just like Snowy. Now the green stuff there is duckweed. It's a little plant about a ½ inch across. The South Greenway is covered with it, but apparently not enough to cause any problems with the fish. We still have fish under it. I've read that if it gets too heavy, it decreases the oxygen of the water and is not good for the fish, but apparently they do okay. He's fishing through this stuff. I don't know how. How does he know a fish is there? Does the fish move the duckweed enough that he sees that as a way to attack, or can he smell it or hear it? And he has that short-looking neck, which is actually much longer than it looks. And he got a fish. So somehow, even though the duckweed is blocking his vision, he's able to tell where the fish are. This is on the South Greenway where a tree has fallen into the water years ago. And this green heron owns that area. So many times I've seen him fly to that tree, walk down to the water, and fish. That's his spot. So this time, I saw him come in, land on the tree, and looked at the turtles. They're in his fishing spot. 3 turtles. You could see him thinking, what should I do? Should I go to another spot? He decided to go ahead and chance it. He walked over The turtles had their heads out, then they brought them in, because they had never seen this before. He gets down to the last turtle, so he's at the water edge. He can fish. What he doesn't realize is the carapace is very rounded, it's very wet, and it's covered with duckweed. So when he goes to strike the fish, he falls off the turtle. He lands in the water and is so upset he doesn't fly, he walks out. Got the fight feathers up, the wings out, and he just is very irritated. He looks kind of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and of course they are little dinosaurs, and he is playing a role. The next week, I saw him come back with fight feathers ready to go again, lands on the tree, looks around for turtle check, goes down to the bottom. I don't see any turtles, so he goes home. This one's a stretch now with the anthropomorphism. See that leg going out and the talons out? Anybody remember Robert Crumb's drawings from the 60s or 70s? 60s, I think. That was during the psychedelic art period. Can anyone possibly imagine what this might relate to in the terms of Robert Crumb's paintings? I saw it immediately, but I have a problem. So that's where Crumb got the idea, I'm pretty sure. And printing, you can see the feathers real good. Here, the smaller feathers on the back and the Art Deco on the wings. Now, there are 3 things I've found that I need in wildlife photography. The first one, of course, is patience. You have to be willing to stand there for a long period of time, maybe up to 30, 40 minutes. The second is a very tolerant wife who will stand there for 30 or 40 minutes, watching you stand there for 30 or 40 minutes waiting for you to do something. And luck, serendipity. I went out on the Greenway one day, North Greenway, walking along the waterway where another waterway comes in. So they're like little islands there. and I see a deer. They're extremely skittish. So I said, well, he's going to turn around and go back where he came as soon as he sees me. So I looked at the deer. The deer looked at me. I said, what? I had the camera set for birds in flight, so I had it on burst mode, and I had the settings right for the light. He looked down at the water. I said, you're kidding me. Is he measuring the distance to the other side of that stream? So I was prepared to take the picture, and he started to jump. So I hit the burst mode and was able to catch it. That's probably the best wildlife picture I've taken. And there's one artist that did a painting of it that has a studio at the Blue Door. Now, going through our living room, we looked out the window. There's a little island there on the edge of the retention pond that has trees, and our neighbors, who are excellent gardeners, have turned it into a park. It's very, very pretty. But as I was walking through, I saw an adult male deer and a fawn in that little island of trees. Something happened, the male knocked the fawn over. I knew they were skittish, so all these pictures are hazy because I didn't go on the back porch. I took them through the window. They went out beside the retention pond and made up. So I said, well, that's good. Then they started to walk along the edge of the retention pond toward the other neighbor's fake coyote. Oh! He put that there to keep the Canada geese out of his yard. They came and looked at it and laughed. It's been 2 years. We love the fake coyote now. We use it as kind of a sculpture. So you can see the fawn looking back at the adult deer saying, I don't know. What do you think? The adult goes ahead, looks back to be sure the fawn is okay. He says, I'm fine. So the adult continues on. Now this is the key image. What is he thinking? Does he think that's a real coyote? Does he think it's a funny looking deer? Does he think it's a fake coyote? I would go with number 3. He just walks right by it. And he continues on to where the neighbors have some flowers, and he had a snack, and then he went into the woods. The fawn drank some water, and then he went into the woods. The next morning, we get up about 7, and our bedroom window looks out on the same retention pond, and we always look out there first thing in the morning, and there was the fawn. About 15 feet from the fake coyote. He said, what is he thinking? Does he think it's a deer? Does he think it's real and he's just being amused by it? And then he disappeared into the woods. An hour later, we look back again. He's come back, resting in the same place again. So again, the mental thoughts of animals, I don't think we understand them very well. So from this talk, you gather there's nothing on the Greenway but alligators, snakes, birds, and turtles, and deer. There's a lot more, actually. The landscape is gorgeous. It is beautiful. These are the cumulus clouds we get in the summertime. I watch a lot of landscape photographers in England on YouTube. I look at it almost every day. We've been to England. We were stationed in Germany 4 years, and we occasionally go to England. It's dreary and gray and overcast. It's not a very nice weather. And when the landscape photographers see something like this, they go absolutely crazy. And yet, we have it every day in the summertime. We truly live on a paradise. Except for the mosquitoes. There are insects on the Greenway. This is one I've only seen once, but this one you see very, very frequently. The white peacock, a little small butterfly, but you see them everywhere. This is a swallow butterfly, but I show this because of the plant. I thought that was Queen Anne lace. It's not, it's more the hemlock. So it turns out this is a very toxic plant if you eat it. And down at the base it's purplish, and that's how you can distinguish the hemlock from the Queen Anne's lace. But the insects love it. Apparently they don't have a problem. Very common moth. But notice those colors from the bluish green to blue to black. When the sun hits it, it's iridescent. It's just gorgeous. This is mimicry. This is a moth pretending to be a wasp. It looks like a wasp, but actually it's a moth. And you can see the little honeybee there is confused by the whole thing. And he's on the hemlock. Last month I saw this bug I had never seen before. So I took a picture of it and put it on Facebook. And you put anything on Facebook, someone's going to know what it is. It's a Delta flower scarab beetle. If you could see his back, this is a sign of a delta. And you've got these very strange hand-like antennae. A beautiful bug. He's not very big. But you remember all that jewelry that Tiffany did back in the 20s and 30s? A lot of them were insects, dragonflies and beetles and all that. So I thought he was very attractive. But when I went back a couple of days later, they were everywhere, these beetles. All the hemlock plants were covered by them. And they were all making little beetles. And we have a voyeuristic butterfly there saying, of course, get a room. Sweat bee or a passion flower. These guys were very common one summer. I've never seen them since. Rain Veined Darter, one of the dragonflies. If you go to the Island Art Association, Bill McKenna is an exhibitor, and he's into macro photography now, and he's got some beautiful pictures of dragonflies and damselflies, very close up where you can see the colors and the iridescence and all of that. Worth a visit. Now the rough green snake is a very small snake, beautifully emerald green. But I took this picture because of those eyes, those big eyes. Do you remember the artist should remember this. Who was the woman who did the big eye pictures of children and animals? I think her name was Keene. It's a fascinating story. You can go to Netflix, there's a movie called Big Eyes. It turns out her husband was a painter, but not very good. So he had her paint in secret at home. He would take the pictures of the galleries and say he painted them. And they did that for years. And finally it got caught up with him and they said, well, actually the paintings are up by your wife. Marriage didn't work out real well, and then she became very well known. So this to me looks like one of her paintings with the big eyes. If you can appreciate beauty, it's everywhere you look on the Greenway. Now this is a broadhead skink, but I love the color of his head that goes into a bronze, that goes into a black. And on this tree with this bluish green lichen, I think it makes a very beautiful picture. But I know that some people say it's just a reptile. We have flowers, spiderwort. It's hard not to say marshmallow, but this is a marshmallow. Little pink flower about an inch across, and from the distance looks like a little pink blob until you look into it. Very intricate center. This is one of the pictures I'm proud of. This won an award at Wild Amelia several years ago. It's passion flower, but it shows the stages. On the left is the bulb, and then the big flower that's beginning to blossom, and then the full blossom. And the evening primrose. Very difficult to photograph in white sunlight because it is so bright. You have to really stop the camera down. That's why everything's black behind it. Familiar with the term synesthesia? It's where neurons conducting certain objects are next to neurons conducting something entirely different, but there's some sort of communication between the two. A synesthete, as the people are called, when they see numbers, they see them in color, even if the number is not in color. Some, if they hear certain notes on a piano, they see a color. So the neurons are close to each other. Now to me, I'm not a synesthete, but this looks like music to me. I don't know why. It looks like a musical score. Actually, of course, it's nothing but a vine that's wrapped around a branch that broke, and now it's hanging like a mobile. It's one of my favorite photographs, so I have it back there. Now, I play trombone in the community band. I tried to play this and I couldn't. So that's the end. Thank you for coming to the museum. And if you haven't been to the Greenway, I hope you will go. It is safe. And don't go when it is hot weather, but go early in the morning is the best. Take some mosquito spray and take your camera because there's a lot to see and shoot out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Any questions that I can answer? Well, I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I'm going to go ahead and have mine.
Thank you all so much for coming today. What a wonderful turnout. Thank you. Thank you very much. Absolutely.